be a student, don't be a follower. And I think that's more important advice today than ever. Like, you can learn from different people and different perspectives, but don't just adopt everything everyone says. Like, Jake, you're following people probably out of just curiosity who you don't agree with or don't fit with. But for people who are new into the game, they probably don't have the wisdom to separate, like what I take in and what I make practice out of. So I think especially for new entrepreneurs and agency owners, like, just be really careful. I mean, I like a lot of what Alex Hormozy says, but if I were a new entrepreneur today, I would be very, very careful in saying, like, well, do I want to live that kind of life, or do I want to have a family and work 20 hours a week and have more freedom and hustle in seasons? Like I think that's all that to say. That's my big passion right now, that message to get out.
Welcome to the Web Design Business Podcast with your host, Josh Hall, helping you build a web design business that gives you freedom and a lifestyle you love.
Hello, my web designer friends. So good to be here with you on this one. This is a special edition episode for the podcast. I am burning up right now. Thank goodness I do these intros for the audio podcast, just audio, because I am shirtless right now in my office. My office, it's above the garage, and it's like afternoon on a hot 93-degree day, so it's toasty. So at least this is just audio, so our views don't go down. Or would they go up? Mm-hmm. All right, anywho, this conversation is a recent interview that I was fortunate to be on for the EverBros Agency Growth Podcast. I actually had one of their co-founders, Jake, on recently back in episode 327 about relationship first approach to getting web design clients. And they were kind enough to invite me on their show, which is super casual, really fun, really chill. And we just had an open-ended conversation about essentially what I've learned in kind of fumbling and accidentally starting and then eventually scaling my web design agency. And we're repurposing that for you. We really get into it's kind of wide ranging. I didn't quite know what to call this, but really dive into, as an agency owner, how to avoid comparing yourself to other agencies. One of the most important topics that I've thought about, especially more recently, is to be a student and not a follower. For the folks that you're following as far as influencers, we get into strategies and proven layouts over creative custom client design requests. Something that we both get into, well, all of us get into in this conversation because they are Divi users themselves, is how ironic it is that Divi gets bashed for being SEO, like a problem with SEO. However, both of us seem to be doing just fine. Interesting. And do not let the name in their title fool you. These guys are not the typical bropreneur type. So we have actually a little segment on whether or not bropreneur culture is thriving or dying. All of that and so much more in this one. Check their podcast out if you enjoy both Jake and Cody. It's the EverBrosPodcast.com. They may or may not be revamping that to the Agency Growth Podcast. I would probably recommend it, gents. And they got some other good resources for you as well. If you want to see their agency site to see how they are serving their niche of landscaping web designers, you can check them out at evergrowmarketing.com. All those links will be over at the show notes at joshhall.co/339. All right, I'm going to go get some water because I'm burning up. Enjoy my conversation with Jake and Jody from the Agency Growth Podcast, formerly known as the EverBros.
No, I was saying that it helps that their head of Wix Studio owned a 20-person agency for 6 years. So their shift to the agency space, they have the right person at the head, and they're really tackling that. I mean, they're going after, when I think of agency web platforms, I think of Webflow or High Level now. High Level is going really hard after those agencies, and Wix is producing a platform that I think is going to crush them.
That's interesting. I didn't realize the head of Wix Studio was an agency owner, which makes a whole lot of sense. I figured they would have to have somebody who knows what agencies are looking for. Again, I think what's more interesting is the DIY market right now, because there's such a blended muddy mess of DIY and AI builders now. I think that's what's changing a big shift. It's just interesting to me that people are going towards freelancers and solopreneurs and agency owners versus the DIY crowd.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think website development is becoming more accessible to less skilled people. And it's kind of almost lowering the price of the market. So like before, like a website development to have one professionally produced, easily $10,000. And now you can find things that are like of decent quality. It might not be SEO optimized, but you can find things of decent quality for a couple thousand, even less than that. I mean, you can find really good quality websites for $500 for somebody who's like trying to cut their teeth. You know, and like,
it probably depends on what you're asking for though, too. Right. I mean, depending on the complexity of the things that you want, because like the AI thing, you're playing with fire, the more complicated the things that you're asking it to do. So I think of like the Wixes out there. I say that I use the word and I'm defaulting to how I know Wix to be, which after we just talked to Kobe over at Wix, but you know, it's the DIY solution that's affordable. And that's why they have the YouTube videos with the celebrities saying, hey, check out the site I built on Wix. Right. It is that part is accessible, but depending on what you're asking it to do, I think is the big thing. You start getting complicated. You want these different integrations and that sort of stuff, and you want to be reliable. That's where you got to start spending money. I think that's my take.
Well, we'll kind of get into it here. So Josh, Josh and I are already relatively familiar. I was on your podcast a few weeks ago. We recorded a few months ago, but so Josh and I kind of know each other. We had a mutual listener who was like, "Hey, you guys should do a podcast together." So I wanted to bring you on here, but you don't know Cody. You've only heard the rumors of Cody.
Yes,
likewise
rumors.
This is Cody. He co-owns EverBros Marketing, our actual agency, and then we co-host this podcast that we're all on right now. And we started doing this just for fun. And this is literally the style. It's just imagine us at a bar. I don't know if you drink. Cody doesn't drink. But imagine us at a bar.
I'd have a beer with you for sure, Jake.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Cody's welcome too. Cody's welcome too.
Yeah. Well, he'll be there.
I'll stand awkwardly at the bar and drink water. That's what I do in bars.
You were a drummer in a metal band. Of course you drink.
I didn't know that, Cody. So was I. So
no, I was talking about you. I was talking about you, Josh.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I play drums.
Right.
I play drums, but not quite a metal band. Played in the church band a few times, and yeah, it's just up to high school. But that's
there's
cool.
Tons of non-alcoholic options now, which is pretty cool for anyone who's cutting back or not drinking. So all good.
I hear ginger beer is the thing, right? Like a lot of people will do that one.
Just ginger beer. I've never drank ginger beer outside of a Moscow Mule.
I've tried it. I'm like, I'm still going to do water. Sorry. I'm just a hydro homie over here.
Well, before we went on that tangent, we had a really good segue into what the actual topic of this episode was going to be. And we were talking about Wix because we just got off recording with Kobe at Wix Studio, which was last week's episode. But we were talking about DIY solutions and how it's becoming more and more available for everybody out there. But I still feel like there is a gap between a lot of like the newer agencies in the space and even established ones who are realizing that you can't just run successful, in a lot of cases, you can't just run successful social campaigns or Google Ads campaigns, or you can't perform SEO without having some kind of stake in the landing page or the website or something. And I explained this in multiple episodes that we've done, that Cody and I never wanted to be a web design agency. I don't think either of us have a creative bone in our body. So the fact that we had to start building websites, and the reason why we did it is we were just going to offer SEO, Google Ads. But then the more clients that came to us that like they just didn't have websites. So I was wondering what we were going to do. Like, we can't just like say, sorry, we can't work with you because we're a new agency. And we had to find a website solution. So we ended up going with WordPress because that's what Cody and I are both familiar with in our past. And then I was an advocate of WP Bakery, which is formerly a visual composer, because that's what I experienced with. But Cody threw a curveball out there, and he found Divi. So I liked you, Josh, because I realized I had read a lot of your stuff without actually knowing who you are. Because you're a writer for Elegant Themes, aren't you?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, years ago. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So like a lot of your solutions, like your custom solutions, a lot of the custom solutions on Elegant Themes that I read have come from you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, to be honest, it wasn't, I was like in love with Divi. It was just, I was looking at the list of solutions, which was not really that long when it came down to it, of where can we get the combo of a visual builder with a license that's going to work as an agency. And once you made that combo, the list was not very big, and Divi ended up being one of them. So that's cool. I didn't know that you had written for them though.
Yeah, that's actually what kicked off what I do now with teaching online and teaching on web designers. Is the content manager at that time for Elegant Themes actually lived here in town in Columbus, Ohio, where I'm from. And this was back in the day when you would post on Facebook and sometimes it would show your location. And so we were in a Divi Facebook group and I was like, holy crap, he lives in Columbus. So I just reached out and asked him to lunch, and we grabbed lunch together. And then I told him about what I was up to with my agency at the time, was just a solopreneur agency. And I was knocking on the door at that point. This was back in 2016 at six figures with my agency. And he was like, dude, that's incredible. And he was like, you actually have a lot of cool things that you do. Would you be interested in writing for Elegant Themes blog? And I was like, holy crap. Like just threw me in deep, deep in head first.
Would I be interested in a backlink? Yes. Yes,
right, yeah, right. Okay. So that's kind of how it all started. I just was sharing what I knew at that time with using Divi and growing my agency. And just like a lot of people who I've found that create content, you don't think you're that valuable or you don't have too much to share until people start saying like, oh my gosh, I would love to be where you are. And yeah, it's what made me realize like, wow, I do have something to share and to teach, and a lot I've learned in this time to give back. So, but you're right. At that time, the market was so different. Divi was maybe the only or maybe one of a few solutions that kind of married not getting too technical with WordPress, but a nice, pleasing visual builder that was semi-DIY. I wouldn't say it's in the DIY market now, but back then it was, back in 2015, 16, and 17, it certainly was.
So speaking of back then, can you walk us through like your history? Like you started an agency, now you have Web Designer Pro, you've got your own group, you've got your own like coaching, your own podcast. Walk us through what led you to do the thing on your own. I know you've got this on your website, but I'd like to hear it like from you personally, because then you start throwing in some minor details and we throw in some questions. But tell us your story. Like, how are you where you're at right now?
Yeah, it actually goes back to being a drummer in a metal band. We were, after high school, I was doing that. We were kind of weekend warriors playing all over the country. And then I was a cabinet maker at that time after high school for a tour bus customizing shop, actually. And I got laid off. I got laid off from my job in 2009 when that industry got hit in the economy. And I had to kind of decide what I wanted to do. And the day after that, I had always had an interest in Photoshop and design. So I just dove in to learning Photoshop. And since I was also a metal drummer in a band, it just naturally kind of fell in my lap that I started doing t-shirt designs and CD artwork. And then we were playing at a festival one time and somebody asked who did our artwork. And I said, I did. And then the light bulb moment for me was when they asked, how much would you charge to do ours? And I was like, wow, I could make money doing something I actually freaking love to do. And it was like a big time change in my life. So yeah, I started designing t-shirts for band and graphic design. And then I was also helping out with a local church at the time. And they were like, hey, would you like to take our website over? No one knows how to do our website. It was on Dreamweaver at that time. So like early days of WordPress, Dreamweaver. And that's what kind of got me kickstarted into web design. And then web design took over for me. And then I started just getting clients kind of on the side and grew a freelance business. And that's kind of how it all got started for me.
How big did you get your like agency? Because I think you sold your agency, right? How big did you get that before you sold it?
So I was a web design freelancer, solopreneur, and then I kind of transitioned to being a web business owner for over the span of a decade. So I summed up kind of the first phase of the journey, but once I made, I think it was about $30,000 on the side. I was taking night school classes to learn Illustrator and InDesign and graphic design programs and some CSS and HTML and Dreamweaver. I was getting clients on the side just by doing freelance work. And then, I made like 30 grand and I was like, wow, if I could do that on the side, what could I do if I went like full time into this and really made it a business? Because my whole goal at that time was just to get a job as a web and graphic designer. But the entrepreneurial bug just kind of hit me and I realized I might as well go for this. I didn't have a family at the time, low expenses. So I became, a solopreneur effectively and started building my business and then eventually started subcontracting, took it to 6 figures. When I got connected with Elegant Themes, I had just hit the 6-figure mark. And that's when I really started growing and scaling my agency. And at the time of selling my agency and at the time of scaling it, I only had a handful of subcontractors. So I was never like a big agency owner. I never even liked the term agency. I was more of just a shop, a web studio, just me as front and center, the lead guy with a few subcontractors, with some really lean and mean systems around WordPress and Divi and our processes. And then I ended up selling it. Actually, at that time, I had started doing courses. And then one of my students who just took off with his business, he ended up taking over my business. So I actually sold it to him. So it was about a period of a decade from going from freelancer to serious solopreneur to web business owner, and then to what I've dubbed kind of nowadays as a webpreneur, web design entrepreneur.
Did you have like a specific niche that you went after, or was it just kind of open to everything? Open
to everybody. Small to medium-sized businesses was kind of my semi niche. I wasn't great for startups or the mom and pop pizza shop kind of places, but I was also not cut out for huge enterprise style clients. In fact, some of the biggest projects I had, which sounded cool on paper to be $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 projects, were actually my least favorite. I would rather knock out $5,000 to $10,000 projects for small businesses and then get them on hosting and maintenance and growth plans and grow it from there. So the cool thing is too, being in Columbus, Ohio, this area of the States is one of the top real estate markets and it's just booming here. So I kind of came in at a good time with being a web designer here. I mean, there was just so many businesses I was able to connect with through networking groups and events. I know, Jake, we talked about that on your episode, how valuable it is to go to conferences and in-person meetups. So it's kind of how I built my network. And I just served anyone and everyone who was a small to medium-sized established business.
You said you had some lean processes to get websites live. How do you develop a lean process if you don't have like a very structured like niche or something? Everything is going to be variable from business to business, if you don't have that established. So like, what were some of the things initially that that were foundational for you to crank out these websites?
It was mainly the tool stack that I was using. That's a great point because I have had people ask me like, how can you have a really good process if you're not doing the same type of sites all the time? But the reality was, as long as you stick with your tool stack and you just stop having the shiny nickel syndrome where you're just going all over the place, you can actually create some incredible processes. For me, it was just WordPress, Divi, and my project management processes that really kind of were the core of my business and how I streamline stuff. Yeah, projects would differ in scope and shape and size and certain tools, but I never built outside of WordPress or Divi. That was my hard and fast rule. That was the only way I stayed profitable and was able to get sites out pretty quickly. And to build a team, it was a lot easier to build a team with just some subcontractors because they only had a few requirements. You got to know WordPress, you got to know Divi. Here's some other tools we use. Yeah, we can add in new plugins if and when needed, but we do not use Elementor or other themes or tools. This is the tool stack. So that's essentially how I did it, was just knowing my tool stack really, really well.
With that team of contractors that were specialized on that tech stack, was that a conscious decision when you got to that point? Was that something where you were thinking, this is how I want to structure the business because it's ideal for me and how I work and my goals? Or was it kind of an accident that you just fell into?
It was definitely more of an accidental fumbling, falling into it. It's not something I set out to do. I had never envisioned myself running a team of any sort, even just subcontractors that were working essentially part-time. I was a very, to my detriment, proud solopreneur and took pride in doing everything. But I read a book recently called Free Time by Jenny Blake. It's something I recommend in a course that I have about scaling. And there's a quote in there that really resonated with what I went through, which is that the only reward for doing everything in your business is burnout. And I did not burn out myself, but I got close at times because I was just doing absolutely everything. So I definitely realized at some point I needed to get some help. I started getting help on the technical side of things just because I'm a pretty good designer. I'm a pretty good marketer, pretty good with copy and messaging. The coding side of things was not my strong suit. And I'm pretty darn good with CSS, but that's about it. Like, I don't know anything about PHP or really anything apart from that. So I started getting help in that area from Facebook groups that I was a part of. And I had actually started a Divi Facebook group. And that's kind of how I started getting help on the technical side of things. And then shortly before my first daughter was born, I had met who eventually became my lead designer. He just sent me a message. He sent me this email saying he was new, but he loved the industry and was really into design and really liked working with Divi and WordPress, and he'd love a shot at kind of a mentor role. So I started giving him some kind of small projects, just some low risk, low pressure projects, and he killed it. And then like in no time, he was a better designer than I was. So I brought him on essentially as the lead designer. And then it just kind of expanded from there. I just realized what I wanted to focus on, and I got to the point where once work was being done while I was sleeping and projects were getting done faster, I'm like, well, I'm never, ever going back. I'm never not hiring and subcontracting when you can just get stuff out the door and you can free time up. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but when you hire out a little bit, there is something about like the mental bandwidth and the load on your shoulders that just releases a little bit when it's not all on you. I'm probably preaching to the choir with you guys, being co-founders and running this together. Like when it's not all on your shoulders, it's a good feeling. I mean, there's of course complexities with hiring and partnerships, but it wasn't something I intentionally set out to do. I just kind of dabbled into it, and then I was like, okay, I'm never going back.
Yeah, I think when I was on your podcast, I was towards the end of it. I think you're asking me about how like our growth and like what we're doing right now, and at the time we were struggling with the amount of work that it was a spring. So we were struggling with the amount of work that we had, and we've got a team of 5, including myself and Cody. So really 3 other people, and they're all, we call it internal, but one is technically a contractor because he is in Tanzania. But the rule that we have with our agency is we pay for the position and not for the location. Mm. So if you're in Tanzania, you make the EverBros wages, which is a lot of money in Tanzania. So same thing with like we had like Colombian contractors. We have one from Venezuela who actually moved to Atlanta, and now she's W-2. So having them on our team and was huge help for me because a lot of that stuff kind of got offloaded from like an SEO perspective, because that's more so my role was designing the websites and doing a lot of the actual SEO on the sites. And then Cody's role was kind of doing the paid media and the technical side of setting up websites, and then also the administrative stuff like billing and invoicing. And right now, like one of those things, like one of those team members that we have, we literally hired her just to do documentation and processes. That was it. And she even had like a degree in technical documentation, which I didn't even think was a thing. Like, but she's like, no. Like she's the kind of person that wants to write like GE, like user guide manuals. Oh, and I'm like that's so, I know. And so I was just like, that's wild. And so those like
are the kind of people we need too, right? The
know.
People who we would never dream of wanting to do that are the best people to hire or partner up with.
It's crazy because we wrote that job description and then we put it out to one of our resources at our kind of like subcontractor handling agency. And they're like, yeah, we got someone in mind. And so like they sent her over, and we had like a homework thing where it's like, this is a video of Cody doing something. I need you to document it. Also, here's our documentation outline. on how to document something. And then she like sent it within like an hour, and it was like 2 a.m. And we got him like, this is like flawless. I don't know. This is wild. So the fact that someone like that exists is wild. And I think we hit the lottery with that. But we started having her do more administrative stuff like billing and invoicing. And I think the load that came off of Cody's shoulders is just like literally an elephant came off. So,
yeah. It's just because we're so small, right? We at this point, it's still just being categorized as, are you billable or not, right? Are you accountable for billable hours to the client, or are you internal? And then with that, we're not accounting for a direct, you bring in X dollars for the company. So we just brought it up and we said, hey, look, we need help with this. And if you're open to it, cool, that'd be great. If not, we're going to have to go look for somebody. And she said she was open to it. She's top tier. She's great. We were just talking about it yesterday, about when she's very good at the step-by-step, right? Like when it's bulleted and numbered and stuff. And then I told her, I'm like, there are also parts of writing your procedures and stuff where it deviates from that. And now you have to like explain something. And when you're in that, I'm like, I think these are things that I just need to sit with you on to work through, because I can't expect you to know this sort of stuff. And she said, like, yeah, it's that part's less fun because it's extremely difficult. You can imagine I can't imagine doing it for multiple tech stacks. That would be a nightmare.
Right.
But just to explain a concept too, just so people understand what the goal is before you start reading the bulleted steps, is something that we've been working through lately. And, yeah, no, I did want to ask that originally just because people choose to approach it different ways, right? Some people, for us, we put it out there and we don't really care where people are at. It is what it is, and we find the talent where it is. Some people will do it for, you can outsource contracting specifically for and with the goal of increasing profitability or something, right? And some people will do that. Sometimes it's just, I don't want to handle the logistics of having them be internal on the team and taking care of the benefits and payroll and everything that comes with that. Again, that's more administrative headaches, right? So it's almost like you want to outsource that. So somebody does that to take care of the people that, so yeah, I was just wondering what the motivations were and if it was just something that fell into your lap. And, but I can definitely relate to, it feels good. It feels good when you can get those things off your plate and have somebody help, and it feels amazing, especially when it's the right person.
The reality is I would not be doing what I do today if I didn't scale in my own way with my business, because the time that I freed up is when I started blogging for Elegant Themes, and when I started my YouTube channel, and when I started getting into courses and then eventually coaching. Like I literally could not have done that if I had not scaled my agency just with a few subcontractors to help get the projects out. I essentially looked at my role chart, my org chart, which I would encourage everybody to do, even if you're a solopreneur. Like literally list out the main roles in your business and you'll realize, oh, this is why I'm fried. I'm doing like 20 jobs as one person. And then I realized, these are things I'm not good at that I want to get help with. I was still like creative director and I enjoyed doing the initial design, but things like building out the rest of the pages and all that, I hired out. And then, yeah, that's what freed me to do what I do now. Like there's no way I would be here if I was still a proud solopreneur who did absolutely everything. And as we all know, the real big reason you want to look into doing that is, what if something happens? Like what if you can't work for a couple months? When I just started scaling, I think I've got this on my story page, but when I just started scaling, my first daughter was born and we spent over 2 months in the NICU, the newborn intensive care unit. And I was understandably fried. Like I had creativity zapped. Stress was so high with what we were going through with her. We were literally living at the children's hospital, going back and forth to our home. I was working at a Panera across the street. Like, thank God I had a couple subcontractors at that time who helped me keep projects going. And also, thank goodness I had my maintenance and hosting plan for recurring income, which covered our living expenses at that time. those two things combined are what got us through a really tough season where if it was all on me, I didn't have recurring income and I didn't have any help on the side, that would have been a really, really, really challenging few months. So yeah, for all those reasons and more, I'm a fan of scaling.
I think the challenge that we always run into is like there are like the creative roles in the job that are hard to subcontract out or hire for because they might not be directly billable, and it's hard. And when you're smaller, it's harder to justify kind of those internal resources. So, what the easiest thing for us to hire in is like execution, like marketing execution, website development, because when we have a new client on board, well, we immediately have website work and then we immediately have marketing work after that. So we can offload that and push that aside. But then it's like one thing like I really want to do is when I say we, mostly Cody, created our website templates that we basically pump and dump and like change the content, change the images, change the branding, SEO and everything. But structurally, they're all relatively the same. And we only have like two, and both of those almost look identical, aside from like some discrepancies between like a project-based company and like more of like a reoccurring treatment, because we're landscaping and lawn care. So more like a landscaping versus like lawn care. There's two different types of companies, but both that we serve. What I want to do is hire someone who's like more of like a creative person with Divi, and then have them create more templates, but under our kind of SEO and lean supervision, because we also have really strict plugin requirements where like all of our sites only have 3 plugins. Some might have more based on, form capabilities that they need. But overall, like we had to look into SMTP recently. And we're like, well, can we do this within cPanel? And ultimately, yes, but it's like, it still requires a plugin. Yeah. Like there's no way around it. So, that was like our biggest struggle. It was like, God, we have to add another plugin. And like, I don't know if you've been seeing it in like search engine journal and land lately, where it's like WordPress plugins have been like crazy under attack lately. And that's just not something we want to deal with, because we're not a dev agency and we don't want to deal with things that are breaking or conflicting with each other. So, that's kind of our biggest hurdle right now. But I think, I was detracting for a second. So I think the whole purpose of this episode is that we do have a lot of listeners who want to get into the marketing aspect and want to do like web development. And a lot of them, the first thing that they'll think about is just outsourcing the web development. But then it's like, when you do that, you don't really have control of the hosting because someone else is building it. And if you do have control over the hosting, then you just have to be aware that you have to find the solution that works for you, whether it's a shared reseller on like, WP Engine or like another WordPress hoster, or maybe you use something like Wix or High Level or whatever, but you have somebody else build the website. The other option is just taking it in-house and controlling it from, where you're at. And I think when I usually recommend that, because Cody and I are control freaks, everything that we do in-house. We don't subcontract anything except for legal and accounting. And I think it's just because we are like SEO and process freaks. So like we don't want subcontractors changing the process. If we do use a subcontractor, we want them to follow our process. And in that case, they're pretty much just a part of the team anyways. Mm-hmm. So I guess my main question to you is, for people who are wanting to do service-based marketing, digital marketing, and they realize that they need some kind of website solution, and they're not a designer, they know like almost nothing about Divi, WordPress or Wix or whatever. How confident are you, and somebody who doesn't have a single design bone in their body, are you in someone's ability to still go to one of these platforms and build a decent website and then be able to scale that and create their own web design agency, even though they don't really have experience in it? That was a loaded question.
I think anyone nowadays could design a site that's decent with AI tools and templates and layout packs and everything else, whether it's Divi with WordPress or Elementor, or whether it's Webflow or Wix Studio, whatever. Build a website is different though. There is a big difference between design and build. So I think all those aspects you talked about with SEO, the technical side of things, email deliverability, so many other aspects are included in like building a website and then a web presence. That is a bit different than designing a site that you could do with AI, because AI will design a site, and yes, it'll technically build like a super foundational framework, but it's not building a successful online presence. And I think that's the big hurdle for like digital marketing agencies. What's interesting about this is you guys probably see a lot more of that end of the market. I see much more of the web design side of things. So I'm mainly helping people who do websites first, and then we'll do some marketing depending on what area they have interest in or any sort of experience in. You guys are probably seeing much more of the market where you're doing more PPC, SEO, ads, marketing. And then like you rightly said earlier, it's like, well, we can't really do that successfully if the website sucks or if they don't have a website. So we got to figure out the website part. I think for digital marketers, for anyone doing any sort of marketing with websites, I would also recommend doing what you can to take it in-house, mainly because even if you have a trusted referral web design partner, that's great. But what happens if they stop, or what happens if they disappear or they move on? You may be in okay hands if you transfer to somebody else, but that's just a vulnerable place to be in. And I'm sure you guys know this. Companies will turn on and off and scale up and down their marketing. But what I've found, and one reason I love being on the web design side of things, is if you can be the web person for a company or a dozen or 24 companies, you can have a solid foundation for years and years and years to come just by being kind of the webmaster for them. So they can turn on and off SEO and PPC and anything they want, but the website, we don't turn the website on and off. That stays there. And so if you can be the webmaster, there's a kind of a solid base there that you could build off of. So
I can't tell you how many times that people have turned the marketing out, because in the green industry, the majority of the states, things in the winter, people shut their marketing off, and then they come back on in the spring. Some against our advice, but they'll do it, or they might shut it off for a year because they can't grow faster than they're currently growing. And then, but just by being their website guys and constantly being in their ear and having our name in their footer, in that bottom bar, they come back. And it's like, well, if we weren't the webmaster, if we didn't own the website or put our branding on it, or, weren't emailing them any kind of reports or anything like that, would they have come back to us for the actual marketing portion of it, and just kind of having that control as well. But even on the marketing side, like if they don't pay their marketing bill, which if you bundle hosting in it, like their website being shut down is now threatened. So like, I don't like using it as a vice, but it kind of is as well. It's like, it's another point to making sure that agencies get paid.
Yeah. And one thing I think anyone in your situation could do is, like, if you proactively head into a season where marketing budgets are going to be turned off or ramped down, you could proactively say like, hey, we created a plan for you for the next 3 months through the winter to go heavy on blog content, SEO related things, which we know take a little time to show up anyway. So what if we came up with a content plan to build content over the next few months, did case studies, did reviews, got really far into like customer, reviews and results for you guys. And then springtime, when we ramp up the marketing, all this hard work that we've done over the last few months will be even more powerful on top of the marketing. So I think you're totally right, Jake, to like have the foundation of web design, and then you could kind of proactively and preemptively work on the marketing side of thing, whether it's more content, on-site related stuff versus like growth and marketing services. So if I were, in that kind of business model, that's what I would try to do, is like, how could I proactively either keep them on the same recurring revenue stream, or if it's lower, just change the work, getting ready to ramp up, when we know things are going to be hot in the spring, pun intended. So,
I guess, I don't know, what advice do you have? Because I mean, I've actually never used like an AI builder. Cody and I have both built everything essentially from scratch, or using like, the pre-built Divi templates. And this might even be the answer to the question, but for people who have no design experience and let's say wanted to tackle WordPress and then they got the lifetime membership of Divi, what would be your advice to creating not just a website for clients, but a scalable design that they can feel confident in, that, they're not just like, I think the biggest thing for me is, sorry, you'll see my ADD kick in and I'll start just being like parenthetical sentences. But like when we first started building websites, I had huge imposter syndrome. I'm just like building this, and like, the more you stare at your own design, the like uglier and uglier it gets. So like, I don't know, I don't even know where to take the question, but like how, and you can even feel free to like pitch yourself here too. But like, what's your advice for someone just getting started in web design or needs to design a website, and where should they go and what are the resources they should look at?
I would start just knowing the tool well, as far as like how to confidently build a site, even if it's quote unquote super simple. Like I do have a Divi WordPress beginner course that I'm about ready to revamp here once Divi 5.0 comes out, because things are going to look a lot different with 5.0. Whether it's my course or YouTube tutorials, something that you go start to finish, build a website, even if it doesn't look great yet. The process and the understanding of learning the tool and knowing how to start to finish build a website is like, I can't tell you how important that is for folks who are brand spanking new early on. After that, then the focus should be design. And still to this day, what I recommend is just look at a design you like and rip it off completely. Like literally take a screenshot, or like literally like side by side, design a site, even if it's just to play around with, but design a site that looks exactly like that. Same font choices, same colors, same typography, same layout. You will be shocked. And I'm speaking to everyone who's starting out. You will be shocked at how much you learn when you rip somebody's design off. Now, I'm not saying publish that and rip somebody's design off completely, but you take that, you change colors, you put your own spin on it. And the next thing you know, just like with your guys' templates, one site that's based off a template can look very different pretty quickly with different colors, typography, headings, hierarchy, different sections, etc. So that's really where I would start. And then I would tackle messaging and copy, and then SEO, and then optimization, stuff like that. I have a suite of courses in full transparency that guide folks through the entire process with different courses. And then you get into the business side of things, because I do see people rush into starting their business thinking they could just do an AI site or a template site. But then you realize, well, if your websites are shit, I wouldn't try to build a 6-figure business yet. And the reality is it doesn't take that long to make a decent site that's built pretty well, that is a strong foundation, and then you can kind of build from there. So that's kind of the path that my students follow through my courses, and that I recommend for everybody is you got to know the builder, start to finish, feel good about building a site, design, then copy, messaging, SEO, optimization, speed, accessibility, privacy, everything else can come later.
I was going to say, like, what were some of the challenges that you had? Like you know Divi like front and back. Like what were some of the challenges that you had after you designed the website? You're like, great, I got this beautiful website. It's working. Like it, my client loves it. But then like functionality wise, you're going to run into some challenges. Cody and I, we were talking to Wix about how like functionality emails aren't delivering after the forms, so now we have to look into that and look into SMTP and SPF records and DKIM records. Like what were some of the challenges that you had from a functionality perspective after the design?
That was a big one. Email deliverability was definitely a top. SEO as well, because I got into SEO later. I was much more focused on design, and then eventually into what is now known as copywriting and messaging. We didn't call it that 10 years ago, but it was design, copy, and then email deliverability was a big one, and then SEO. I realized every client virtually I talked to inevitably said, I want to be on the first page of Google. So I realized, well, shoot, now I really got to look into SEO on how to get good SEO principles here on the websites as well. So those are the big ones. I mean, that was really, as far as like functionality goes, unless it was something that was a separate type of thing, if somebody wanted a calendar feature or e-commerce or more advanced functionality for the business, the core aspects were mainly email deliverability. Security was a bigger issue, honestly, 10 years ago than it is now, as long as you have good hosting. Like I created a maintenance and security plan specifically highlighting security. Like we were doing advanced security. Luckily, if you have really good hosting now, whether it's SiteGround or WP Engine, most of them have pretty good security measures as long as you're doing things right and keeping plugins updated. But that was a big one at the time for me, was having sites get hacked. So yeah, email deliverability, SEO, security at that time, which still comes into play today with WordPress. And then ongoing, like update and care for the plugins and the tools. Those were kind of the big things that made the job not fun after getting a nice design built and launched.
I've been talking for a while. Cody, do you have anything in the pipeline that you're trying to get out there?
Let me be honest. I had some ideas, but World War III is happening outside of my window. I think it's snuck through a few times, but I was doing my best to ignore it so we're right by the airport, and so there's been a few planes, and that's normal. And I was like, okay, I can deal with that. And then they just started mowing, and they're right there. And I'm like, come on. I was having...
You should yell out, open the window, be like, we're doing a podcast.
They're going to be like, what? What'd you say?
I haven't heard it. I haven't heard it come through. I would have never known.
Cody messaged me on Google Meet about it, and I didn't hear it when he messaged me. And then I heard it one time. And all I did was just send him a screenshot of the mute mic button.
It wasn't letting me at first. I don't know what was going on. I think it's because this is my first time with Riverside. But no, one thing that I had was just what made you want to make your own courses later on too, right? Going from the, what was the mental progression of why you wanted to start exploring that as opposed to just continuing down the service path? Because these are different business models with different earning potentials and how they go, right?
So different. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I've realized, as much as I'd love to be able to plan and forecast for the future and have like a clear vision, I'm just not wired like that. Like I can look about 6 months out. That's really about as far as I can go. Otherwise, it's just going to change. So with courses, it was the same way as I started my web design business. I just kind of fumbled into it. Even when I became a blog author for Elegant Themes and I got into the Divi community, I started a Facebook group, I started my YouTube channel. I had no idea where it was going to go. It was actually extremely costly on the books at that time because I was creating content. I was spending a lot of time. I did get paid for my Elegant Themes blog, but it was like $200-300 a blog. It wasn't that much. So not enough to live off of, but, I didn't quite know what I was going to do with that. I originally I thought I might build child themes, and oddly enough, like exactly what we're talking about having a structure and a template to go off of is what I had thought about creating, which I did end up creating a business child theme for web designers, which is in my business course. So very late answer to Jake's earlier question. That's a good option for everyone who wants a proven template to base your business off of. But yeah, I was going to do child themes, and then more and more questions after I started doing my YouTube tutorials were about courses. They were like, do you have a Divi course? Do you have a Divi course? And then when I started talking about business stuff, they were like, do you have a business course? How do you get clients? Where do you price? How'd you build recurring income? And then I was like, maybe I should do a course. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would do a course. I have always enjoyed teaching, but it's not something I had planned on at all. So I was like, what the heck? I'll go for it. When I started, about a year after I had started my personal brand with joshhall.co and my YouTube channel, I was like, I'll build a course. And initially I was going to do a Divi course, but then I was just so dang passionate about maintenance plans and hosting plans and recurring income, because it is literally one of the things that got me and my family through that time in the NICU with my daughter, that I was like, I'm just going to do a course about that and we'll see where that goes. So I did a course that literally unpacks my maintenance plan from start to finish, how I build it, the tools I use, how I sell it, how to sell it to new clients versus previous clients, the whole process. And I launched that in August of 2018. And I think I had 80 some students come the first wave, and I made like almost $10,000. And I was like, all right. let's keep on doing this because I loved it. And then the really cool thing happened, which is I started getting results in student testimonials and people saying, holy crap, dude, I have recurring income. Eric, who now runs my agency in Transit Studios, was one in the first wave of students. And what got us connected is he said that the money he made with his maintenance plan with recurring income is what helped his family adopt 2 kids. They were stuck in adoption and needed financially to get ahead. And they built recurring income that allowed them to adopt 2 children. And that was still to this day, I get chills thinking about that. That's how we got connected and so close. And eventually I saw him blow his agency up. And then I was like, okay, you're the guy to take over mine. So that's kind of how it all started. I just tried it out based off of a lot of people requesting it. I loved it. I loved the entire process. I loved teaching. I loved creating it. I loved seeing the results. And then it was like head down. I did have a vision for a suite of courses outlining the entire process we just covered, from learning Divi, process of web design aspects, basics of SEO, DNS and cPanel. And I created a suite of courses over the next 6 months. And that became my initial suite of web design courses. And that's what set me in a whole different career path.
I always have a negative perception of course creators. Not necessarily you, but like,
I thought you were going to say, you're like, I just don't like you. I don't like what you just did.
Especially you, Josh. How you're taking advantage of people. Like, but you've probably seen it too. Like, there's just this wave, and it always happens. It's like course creators, crypto, and it's constantly doing this wave, and it's one of the reasons we started this, like, our podcast. And it was like, I was just so sick of kind of like the fake YouTube gurus providing just awful advice and advice that sounds good. But then, like, when you're an actual agency owner, you start to realize like that doesn't work. That doesn't apply. You can't scale that. You can't charge $5,000 a month for organic social posting. There's no ROI in that. And any doctor is smart enough to know that that's a waste of money. But it's been a weird experience for us because we have listeners that are, I don't want to say begging, but like constantly asking for us to release courses and do courses on kind of like the reoccurring agency model, the productized service model that we have, and more of the business aspect, and not necessarily like, I don't want to do an SEO course. I want to do an SEO course from an agency's perspective on like how to scale that, or like when you like setting up and Google Ads MCC, managing multiple Google Ads accounts, and those are the types of courses, doing things from an agency's perspective, top down. Because even when, like, Cody says this all the time, like, we set up an MCC for Google Ads, but could Cody walk through right now how to do that? No. We'd have to like relearn it because we had to do it one time. And
well, the tricky thing too with that is if tools change and the UI changes and you have an out-of-date course, that's the danger of topical courses. Heads up for anyone who does that. I try to keep most of my stuff evergreen that can last several years, if not more. But there's a huge market for that. And I see that too, Jake. Like, I think we're all immune to the bropreneur kind of Lamborghini lifestyle stuff now. I think everyone's well past that. I mean, maybe there are a few people who want that and achieved it, but
have you been on Reddit lately?
No, I'm not on Reddit at all. So, all right, maybe not. Well, here's the thing that's different too, is I think one thing that helped me when I became a course creator is I just was not in that world. I didn't follow any entrepreneurial people. I just didn't see that. So I didn't even have any aversion to it because I just quite honestly didn't really know about it. Like, I've been in a nice little ignorant bubble that has actually safeguarded me from too much imposter syndrome and that, because I was so ingrained in specifically WordPress and Divi to where I didn't even think about other builders. Like, I didn't think about Wix people. I didn't think about Squarespace people or Webflow. I don't even think it was out at that time, or maybe it was in its infancy. Like, I just helped WordPress people using Divi who wanted to build maintenance plans. So it was like hyper niche. And to your guys' point, if you ever do that, the more niche you can get, like, SEO and marketing plans for landscaping agencies. Like, I don't know what the competition would be there, but the more niche you get with a course in particular, especially nowadays, the better. So I was like, yeah, I was pretty safeguarded from that. And it did help that I already had an audience with my YouTube channel and with my Elegant Themes blogging. So I was kind of known as somebody who is trustworthy. And for over a year, I gave out all my information for free. So in a weird way, I recommend doing that. Like, just share everything you know for free. And then once you have some sort of sizable audience, then you could monetize it, as douchey as that sounds.
We just passed the 2-year mark of doing this podcast, and we have 0 sponsors.
Congrats.
And we have 0 merch. Yeah, thank you. And it's every single Friday for the last 2 years and 2 months. This podcast has come out and 100% free. So, like, we're still talking with like first preliminary sponsors, but we refuse to let anybody sponsor the podcast who we can't personally vouch for, because like we've done this work of building our audience because we're like the no bullshitters, like the agency that doesn't do that. And the minute we have some white label agency guru pay us to be on the podcast, like the minute our credibility goes out the window.
What's the hard thing too, though, is everybody and their mom is like, yeah, we're the no bullshitters. And it's like, okay, so what do you do to say that you're actually right?
What's your price?
It's a marketing ploy too. It's at the same time where everybody's trying to do that. Like, oh, we're real, we're not fake. So I think it's really important. I think it's cool what you said too. And I think more people should listen to that about not living in that world, not living in the world of influencers and bropreneurs and that sort of thing. The problem nowadays isn't a lack of information. There's plenty of it out there. It's that you have too much and it's pulling you in different places, and more likely you'd be better off just really zoning in on a few key places and listening to what's happening there. I don't know.
That's what our goal is pulling those people away from the stuff that's easily consumable. Like, and by that I mean like, kind of like the selling the dream stuff, like consumption on YouTube. And Cody is very much of your mindset too. Like I bring something to his attention. He goes, I don't even know this person existed.
Well, I
have a tip on that, but yeah, I want to hear you.
Cody, what were you going to say?
I used to live in that world. And then I got so done with it. Right. I just knew, I'm like, I think I started to meet enough of the people in real life, even if it wasn't them, it was the people who were inspired by them or like half entrepreneurs. And I knew, and I could tell them like, these aren't real. This isn't real business, right? This isn't how business is actually conducted. These are gypsies and grifters, right? I mean, we're fighting for $1 because we never want to crack down hard enough and actually do the hard work. We just keep continually going one after the other for the easy dollar. And through doing that, you're always doing more work than if you would just stop and crack down and do the hard work the first time. And if you do that, still over the relative short term, right? I'm not talking months. You're still measuring in years, maybe 5 years, maybe even 10 years, but we're not talking 40 years. We're not talking about a full lifetime of your career. You can accomplish crazy things as long as you're willing to do that. And then you do still win. So I think that's what people need to get to mentally, is recognizing that and realizing that, and do real business. That's okay. It's scary, but you can do it. And if you do that, you'll still come out ahead.
Entrepreneurship is freaking hard. It's why not many people last. It's why the few people who do, in a way, whether they come off shady or not, are teaching what they know, is because it's awesome. It's amazing. It's so rewarding. It's freeing. It's incredible, but it's freaking hard. And there's no exact rule book. Things are changing every year, every month. So I think when it comes to attracting the right audience for courses and creator and programs and stuff like that, the sweet spot that I've landed on, and this is more recently, I've really solidified my viewpoint on this, is that I do not like helping people getting into web design as much. I will help early stagers for sure, but you'll notice if you see any of my marketing or any of my posts, I'm never encouraging people to leave their 9 to 5. That, like, you have so much work to do mentally before you even start making money. I do think I think everyone can make money with a side hobby, with anything, but making a living and being a business owner, an entrepreneur, is a whole other ball game. So where my stuff, what I've tended to really push out now is that I'm helping web designers who are already started in their business, even if they're still working full time, they're side hustlers, but I help them make an actual profitable 6-figure business, but not 7-figure. I don't teach 7-figure people. That's a whole different business model. I really love the sweet spot of like 100,000 to 500,000. That is like my sweet spot of web design student. I probably need to put that in my copy. But.
It's like every year I feel like it upgrades. Like there's like a course that comes out and it's like, here's how to start your 10K per month like agency. And then like the next year, like another person like outdoes that at like 10K a month. How about 30K? And then it goes like 100K. And then it's like, I get these ads because I'm in this space. So I get these like ads on Facebook all the time. But there's one guy that I follow, and I follow all of these guys that I think are absolute jokes. Just because I like to just be in the space. It's like a weird, sick, I don't know, like hobby of mine. But like he is pitching how to grow a 500K per month agency from nothing in like a year. I'm like, dude,
you feel
bad for people who buy into that.
Yeah. And, the reality is there are some people who can do it, but they're so few and far between. I have a student of mine in my community, Web Designer Pro, Sam, who you guys would love. He's like all about local SEO. And what's funny is like he got into Web Designer Pro brand spanking new. And I did tell that he was pretty entrepreneurial, and I thought he had a good head on his shoulders, and I could tell he had a good work ethic, but I'm like, cautiously optimistic. We'll see if he sticks with it. A year later, he's closing and he's on the track to do 6 figures. Now, that's rare. That is not all of the students. He also he's in a place in life where he didn't have a mortgage or family. He had a little more wiggle. He was able to have 6 months of barely anything. And in the back half of 6 months, he kind of went like this, up and to the right. That's how it goes though. Like most people, I think the whole like 500K months in a year, it's like, there's just so many dang variables. So I really, as much as I do help people get into web design and build it, my community actually helps all 3 stages of people starting, getting to 6 figures and going to multi 6 figures. But what I'm trying to do better at is meet them where they are. And then it's funny. I love that we're talking about this because I almost named my podcast Web Design Business Made Easy. I actually was creating the graphics and I was like, you know what? I felt icky. I felt like the bropreneur because I'm like, it's not easy. It's not easy. I don't want to say web design business will kick your ass, but I don't, I want to be realistic. Like, guys, it's not easy. If you're expecting this to be easy, I don't know, go to college or follow a proven path. It's not easy.
The funny thing is that like we realize the irony in our name, the EverBros, because like when the agency is EverGrow Marketing. So then like EverBro is just like a play on that. And then we're just 2 dudes. But I was actually adverse to this. I told Cody I didn't want this to be the podcast name because there was a podcast a while back that I listened to and it was like Marketing Bros or something like that. And it was just the douchiest podcast I'd ever listened to ever. And it was literally like, you could tell these guys are all roided out wearing like chains and super tight t-shirts with like their Jersey Shore spiky hair. And like, that's just what they sounded like. I'm like, that's what we're going to be known as. And we're also going to alienate our female demographic. And, and like Cody was like, nah, it's fine. So we did it.
I was like, it's fine. They'll listen and they'll be like, oh, these guys are kind of nerds. It's fine. That's not what it is.
Like we even had listeners come out and say like female listeners. And they're like, at first I was hesitant. I wasn't, it didn't want to listen to it. I thought it was just for dudes. Then she listened to it and she's like, and it literally has nothing to do with bros. It's just that's the name. And then I appended it. I was like, well, I have a better idea. Why don't we do EverBros Agency Growth Podcast? And so we changed it to that. And then I'm like, as soon as we rank for Agency Growth Podcast as number one, EverBros comes off. Like, that's just where the Agency Growth Podcast, and EverBros is just like the moniker, but not part of the brand name. We can actually do that now.
I was going to say, that sounds pretty wise. Yeah. 2 years in, be an interesting case study.
So Agency Growth Podcast, I believe we are number one. This is my bad SEO search. Yeah, we're number one in this browser.
Number one on my side. Yep.
Yeah. So like we did it, but there's still competition, and like there's like the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. Okay, well, I don't want people to get confused now on like, just because we both rank, which one is it? So EverBros might be here to stay, unfortunately, but.
Well, and then we've talked about the gender split a little bit too. And I imagine it's, this was an agency before I went full time in with this. This was just a passing once. I remember hearing it. They were hiring for a web dev, right? They needed a new developer, and something about the topic had come up of proactive hiring for, racial inclusion and or gender inclusion. And, the CEO at the time just said, look, 1 out of 10, or in Iowa, 1 out of 10 applicants that we get is not a white dude. And that's it. So like we could try, and we are trying to be inclusive, and we just don't receive that many applicants. And we talked about that too, then about our listener demographic and what is the demographic of agency owners, right? How many are women versus how many could be listeners that are women, right? There could be just that this is the existing demographic of agency ownership, period, right? Where it has a stronger male demographic, and whether or not that's a good or bad thing can be debated, right? But just that maybe that's what the actual makeup is of the audience, and not because people are seeing bro. Oh yeah. Okay. Bro, I'm a bro. I'll listen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is interesting. One thing that I've found is that I don't want to generalize too much, but the reality is a lot of women who are in the web design and marketing space now are brand and graphic designers. Like there's a large amount like that. They're actually agency owners. I just don't think they resonate with that as much. And it may be because traditionally agency owners have been douchey bro white guys. So, present company excluded. Like, I do. That's what's so fascinating. Web Designer Pro, my community, has actually been a really interesting psychodemographic experiment, because we actually have, and there's no terminology I've ever put out about diversity and inclusion or anything, but we are it's incredible. We have people of all different race and color and gender. I think we're nearly 50-50. Guys and girls in pro, which is incredible. Awesome. But one thing that I've learned, and one thing that I've proactively done with that, is particularly for my podcast, I try to stagger my podcast episodes. If you guys look at my podcast, it is guy, girl, guy, girl, guy, girl, guy, girl for interviews. And I think that simple process has really helped out. And I do try to get people with different backgrounds, and as much as I can showcase testimonials of people who are not your typical web design agency owner. So it is interesting. It's you don't need to say that nowadays, but just do it. Talk to people who are a different color or who have a different background or have more girls on the podcast. If you reach out to women who are in marketing, especially in any sort of ads or SEO or brand and strategy, that does help with the demographic type of split. So it has been really interesting. Where pro is at right now is it is funny. I've had new members be like, this is the most diverse web design community I've ever been in. And they weren't expecting that. They were a little nervous. I'm like, I know I probably should I don't even want to say it now because I don't want to ruin it. It's going so well, but
yeah,
it's true. I think it's just kind of going back to don't say it, just do it. And that goes for clientele too. If somebody's wanting different types of clients or wanting to grow a certain audience, just reach out to those people, get them on your show and just do it. Or if you do have a one success student, like a success story, and you could do a case study out of that. Who is somebody a little bit different than you would expect to be in that industry? Ride that wave, like really, promote their story out there. So that's one thing I'm trying to do better at over the next, the rest of 2024 as well.
I guess we kind of see a little bit of that with the split between SEO and ads, right? Usually the content, the organic work, design too, right? That being included is more women, and then the ads, analytics, tracking, and that sort of thing we see more along the guys thing. But I don't. Maybe it's because we haven't done a lot of intentional outreach to get certain people on the podcast. It's mostly been what comes in. And we just haven't seen as much of that, but there are definitely, I guess the other thing too, is just locally, right? I'm not involved locally in this industry. Usually, honestly, I don't like a lot of local people that,
I don't like a lot of online. I don't like people in general.
Yeah, I guess the online crowd's bigger though, right? So you can find people that mesh with you better once you just open up that bigger audience. Whereas locally, you're just dealing with what you have available. So when I do find specifically women entrepreneurs where I'm like, man, they're crushing it. I want to like talk to them, and they have nothing to do with our industry though. It's not tech, it's not dev. It's just, man, they're doing a really cool thing. There's a few that I could potentially reach out to though. I don't know them very well, but
I can introduce you guys to a few colleagues of mine who would probably be a great fit for you.
So that'd be cool. This is how our podcast goes. We start on a topic and we go on a huge tangent right now. Apparently our listeners love it. We love it. But then we'll come back to, I get more questions on like the actual scaling, the design part of this. But Jay on our team, he listens to our podcast too. And he was like, do you guys not have women on the podcast? And like, it was kind of like the soul crushing thing that he said. And I was like, no, like that's not what we intend.
We were like, no, why? Why do you think that?
It's not the Ever Sisters podcast.
Yeah. So we had, we have had a couple episodes with women. We had, our significant others, in one episode, we were all in Japan together. And so we did an in-person podcast there, just kind of bringing them on and asking them about like, what's it like being engaged to somebody that spends, 80 hours a week on, their agency. And then, we had, actually the legal team from our contractor, hiring agency on top. They were both women. So we had them on the podcast, but the challenge with having guests on our podcast, and we've said this in our own openings on our episodes, is that the majority of people who reach out to us are those kind of like, they're not necessarily they're course creators and white labelers, but they're course creators because they took an online course to become a course creator. And it's very easy to see through that. And especially like agencies who are like white label ones, it's hard for me to tell them like, I don't believe you. Like, I don't believe you're as successful as you say you are. And if you're using success as a metric to get on our podcast, I need to see your books, because it doesn't sound like cool of me to do that. But like, we have this podcast is a brand identity. And a lot of the people who listen to us because of that, because we're not just going to have those people on the podcast to shill their stuff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we don't know very many women in the space, let alone women who are at that success level to bring them on. There is something that we are playing with, and it's people who are reaching out to us for help and just having them on for free and just being like, using them as a case study and like, okay, yeah, we'll talk through your problems.
Have you done like a LinkedIn? I feel like you could probably utilize like LinkedIn with demographics and position.
Like LinkedIn, like an ad?
No, like just like
posting.
filtering LinkedIn folk, like female entrepreneurs, agency owners. So you could probably get like 200 lined up like that, I would imagine.
Oh, probably.
If we were to proactively reach out.
Yeah, like through like Sales Navigator or something.
Or you can join Web Designer Pro. I can connect with like 20.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. We want more guests.
I have a couple in mind who are agency owners who I think would be great. Some gals who'd be great fit for your podcast.
Hook us up. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
I've got one in mind. I know of in Des Moines, but really that's like it when it comes to specifically agencies. And like I said, there's some other ones too that I don't know. It's cool once you get into entrepreneurship and then you just see somebody crushing it and you're like, man, I want people to just know about you and how you're doing such a good job. But also I don't have the platform that's most appropriate for it. But I want people to know how cool you are, because you're doing so well that if nobody's like, if you don't have people, in your cheer box, I want to be there behind you just to tell you the things that your dad should have said if he hasn't by now, because you're just crushing it. Right. But maybe that's just me. But I've started this other thing too internally within the agency recently, where I'm just telling people that they're capable of anything just out of nowhere, just throughout the day. I'll be like, hey, did you know that you can do anything? And they're like,
well, it wasn't out
thanks.
of nowhere. Your wife suggested it to her,
well,
and then
yeah,
you did it. And then Angie was like, I would like to hear that too. now he just does it to everybody.
It was okay. It was a domino effect, but now it feels like it's out of nowhere for some people. Cause Jenny
all
was
good
like,
ideas come from the better half. I know.
yeah. So it happens now. Everybody hears it now. You can do anything. So Josh, in case nobody's telling you, you're like, I already know. I've already done everything, so I'm good.
Appreciate that.
Okay. We're going to go back to the Divi. I've got a couple more questions, or to web design. We got a couple more questions here. A while back, I stored this in my cerebral cortex when you mentioned this, but you said you didn't, when you started, you didn't worry about any other builder out there, any other CMS, any other platform. It was WordPress, Divi. That's it. Everything didn't matter. With kind of like the rise of a ton of agencies and just information overload, a lot of people have, a lot of agency owners, and I know you're really not in the space, but a lot of them have started kind of resorting to other tactics to stand themselves up and make them taller. So like there's always, that saying, there's two ways to build the biggest building. You can either build the biggest building or knock all the other ones down. And there's like this, there's this thing that people are doing where they're like attacking things that aren't part of their tech stack. So if somebody uses Elementor or Oxygen or Beaver Builder, the first thing they do is take a dump on Divi or like Visual or WB Bakery or bloated visual builders. And like, frankly, I don't think the visual builder really matters that much in terms of like site load speed and things like that, because ultimately, like anybody who's complaining about that, I go to their website and their images are just super big and they have tons of JavaScript above the fold and everything. So my question to you is, do you ever have to combat this and kind of defend Divi as a builder from an SEO and kind of loading perspective versus other builders? And
I'm just like, how'd you find me?
Yeah.
And they're like, SEO, Google. I'm like, I use WordPress and Divi, and I don't really do any keyword research. So
nice.
I always tell people to like clients to say this. So like, well, how do I know like you're going to be good at SEO? I'm like, type in lawn care marketing company right now on Google and see who's first.
That is the ultimate best sales tip right there, is like do something that actually works and then ask somebody to, like on their browser, not like my browser or, like no, yours, like search it. What do you see? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a biggie. I mean, what's interesting now is over the past few years, mainly because of my podcast is what has opened up my world into different builders. And Web Designer Pro is an agnostic community. We're not all WordPress Diviers. We actually have like chat spaces and certain places in Pro for their own builders. So we have like a Divi chat space. We have Elementor. We have Squarespace chat, like Webflow. We have a Wix space. So like, there are these other builders. What I've come to realize is, and this is very different from the Josh of a decade ago, is that a lot of these tools will get the job done. I think WordPress is still the place where you're going to be able to be most customizable and you can get a lot of good results. But I've seen some of my students do a lot with Squarespace, with SEO, and you can do a lot of other things with other builders. So more recently, I've been less worried about being just WordPress and just Divi, and choosing the right platform that feels good to you as long as it is going to suit the needs for you and your business. And if it is, then use that, but don't deviate from that. Like, yes, I have my Divi and WordPress beginners course, but I make it very clear to members of Pro when they join, if you use Wix Studio, then you don't have to worry about this course. Start at the design course, which is more agnostic. So I've really taken that approach more recently. And what I've found is as long as I get results and I'm enjoying my tool stack and Divi is increased, like Divi is going to change dramatically when 5.0 comes out. It's going to be a whole new ball game.
You mentioned 5.0 and I see the community talking about 5.0 and I see 5.0 by Divi supporters thrown out when Divi's load times are coming to question. And so I wanted to ask you more about 5.0. I wanted to rudely interject and ask you more about like Divi 5.0. Like, one, do you have insider knowledge on 5.0?
Yeah, it's completely
what
different.
Do you know?
I know everything. I am on a Discord channel with the releases with 5.0, so I do get like early access to be able to check it out. It's very different. The way Divi works, like currently the modules are the same, but the actual visual builder looks completely different. It looks a lot like this standard, like left panel is where you see your layers and everything. The middle is your canvas, and on the right is where you see your modules. And it looks like bricks. It looks like breakdance. It looks like
Elementor.
Elementor. Some of these other ones, yeah. So stylistically, they've kind of morphed it into what is a little more standard nowadays. But from what I know, and I'm not too technical on this, but from what I know of the core of Divi, is it is completely rewritten. Like they have cut out a lot of the bloat that was previously currently in Divi. So I think speed is going to be an absolutely huge different ball game once 5.0 comes out. Of course, if you're using big images and bad practices and you're on a bad host, it's not going to matter. But if what it takes to make a Divi site load super fast now is not going to be much of an issue when 5.0 comes out. So
what was the blow? I mean, the only thing that I keep seeing is like the crazy amount of like ID tags that Divi places on like
that,
literally everything.
I think there's a bunch of requests that load, even if you don't have modules loaded. I think there's a bunch of, whether it's JavaScript requests or PHP requests, there's definitely like, it just loads more on a single page as of now, where other themes are loading less. So actually, Nick, the owner of Elegant Themes, did a Divi 5.
Yeah, Nick Roach. I saw, like, it was months ago. It was almost like December that I saw like the promotional thing for Divi 5 and like some preliminary stuff. And I think in a couple episodes, like Cody and I was like, I told Cody, I'm like, I feel like I should get Nick Roach on the podcast.
He doesn't do interviews. I've tried.
Man.
Yeah, it's really hard. He did an interview with the Divi Chat podcast, which was a core of us who did that for a while. That was the only time he's done like a public interview. Yeah, he's head down and doing Divi 5 from what I see. Yeah, they did a video on speed improvement, so it's going to be very different. Yeah, it's funny because Divi takes so much heat, but I'm just kind of waiting in the corner. And then once 5.0 comes out, I'm just going to go freaking nuts on Divi stuff.
That's our biggest challenge. We use Divi and other agency owners, even in the landscaping and lawn care industry, other agency owners immediately just go, they use bloated themes. They can't be that good at SEO. And it's like, I don't know what to tell you, man. Like our page speed insights is fine. But
I like speed's interesting too, because my site currently, I'm redoing my site on the back end, so I'm not even really worried about my current site. Like it's extremely slow, quite honestly. And when I started teaching and coaching on web design, I started feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, not because of the fact that I don't think my designs are good or copy converts or my business teachings are good, but like my site needs to be improved. But then I realized speed is important, but it's not the end all. It really is not. Now, when it comes to SEO ranking, it's important, but I had a colleague of mine who they have an agency in Nebraska, and their site, it loads at like an E because they have a video background and some other stuff. And I was on the podcast. I was like, what will you say to somebody who says your site loads really slow? And they're like, dude, we're not worried about speed optimization. We're worried about conversions, and our agency is killing it. Like we can't even keep up with the amount of work, because when people go to our site, most of them are local businesses, which is another big differentiator. They're not really focused on UK businesses that need a Cloudflare CDN to load faster halfway across the world. They just work with businesses in their area, so it loads a lot faster being hosted in that area. So it made me feel better when it comes to speed, because it's like, at what cost? Like if you speed up your website super fast, but conversion, like it just doesn't look as great, or maybe you did have a video background that was really engaging and actually kept people on the page, but you take that off and then your conversions go down. You have to kind of weigh conversions and speed. Sometimes they can marry together really nicely, but sometimes it's tricky. So that's kind of my viewpoint on that as far as current Divi in its current form. Quite honestly, as long as my bank account keeps on going up and the revenue goes up, I don't give a shit what anyone says.
Cody says this all the time. It's whenever anybody like shits on our processes. So like one thing that we do that a lot of agencies don't is we bill clients for ad spend up front, and then we spend it on our card. So like we have our payment profiles in ad spend accounts, and tons of agencies say like, that's awful. That's stupid. Like why would you do that? And, we get dogged on it, like on Reddit and podcasts. And Cody goes, this isn't changing the numbers that are coming into our Stripe account. Yeah. So
it's when they say you can't do it. I'm like, here's me doing it. So
my wife said I could do anything.
Cody said you could do anything.
He's with a callback. Nice.
It's a great point. It really is. It's funny. I'm working on a newsletter right now about this, about the only metric that matters. And it really is like, yes, there's more to money. There's more to growth. Like there's happiness and freedom and balance. But all those things I found come a lot easier when your numbers are growing, because if your numbers are growing, and then you can work on balance, then you can work on freedom, then you can work on tweaking your schedule. And as long as you have good clients, good relationships, you enjoy the people you work with, like you won. That's it. There's nothing else. I mean, yeah, you can make the numbers go up, but what else are we striving for? Like there's no reason to blow up a business or change your business model or change how you bill if it works. I
can't remember who said it. It was like, unfortunately, it might've been Robert Kiyosaki, which I'm not a big fan of, but
I've got Rich Dad Poor Dad on my shelf.
It's on the shelf.
So like the only decent book, but then he got into MLMs, and I'm like, I'm out, man. And but he does talk about how like I think it's him. Every problem is virtually solvable at money, and it's like, you want more time with your family? Guess what? You need money in order to not have a job. You want to feed the poor? Guess what? Money. And like. So like that's like the whole premise of like the things that he does is getting people to be able to, experience the better parts of life. But in order to do that, you kind of do have to develop that foundation. So it just speaks to what you're just saying there. But
this is actually really, oh God.
Well, I was just going to say, like, that's been such a pain point in how I try to present myself, is because I do more so present lifestyle freedom with a web design business. And that's attracted lifestyle entrepreneurs, which has been really cool. Like I tend to not to get the bropreneurs who are like, I want to make 7 figures in 3 months. Like those aren't the people I tend to attract, which is great. But inevitably a few months in, we talk about money, because to be a lifestyle entrepreneur, you gotta make some money. So it is interesting marrying those two ideas, like being money focused and freedom focused. And yeah, you don't want to destroy yourself to make money, but you do want to do things smart and have a focus on at least what you need to take home. So, and I think that's where like we talked about earlier about like the bropreneur kind of stuff. Like it's interesting because I can't imagine being attracted to a message of somebody saying have 100K months, when years ago I was excited about like $1,000 a month. So I think there is a lot of a room and like a sweet spot for folks who are like, here's how to build like a 6 to low multi-6 figure business. And I think this conversation has even more encouraged me to really hone in on that sweet spot of 100 to 500,000, for example. I mean, because that's who I serve in my community.
You don't even need that. I mean, like you're tapping into like the digital nomad lifestyle, where it's like, here's how to make a 50K business and you can live in the Philippines in a really good apartment. And
I don't personally, I mean, some of my students do and they can, but I think because I'm a parentpreneur and I'm very open about being a family man and stuff, I've attracted a little more of those. I do have the digital nomads, but the thing with that is like, the digital nomads are like, I just want to make 50 grand. I'm like, that's cool. Like that will like cover my medical expenses for my family. So like I need to make like 300, 400. So, yeah, it can work. But the cool thing is if you have that freedom, that freedom focused, and it can translate to anyone wherever they are in their business, as long as they're focused on freedom more than anything.
So this is what one of the last things that I'd really written down. I really wanted to ask you, and this is not, I feel like Jake had a direction with this podcast, and I just found other things more interesting because of what you've done and the information that you also have available. So there's not many people that you can ask some of these questions to. So I did want to ask, you sold your agency, right? You'd sold it to that other guy you had mentioned. And I want to make sure you sold out completely, but no, you sold the business completely, right? And then you were done with the business, and then you moved on from that one. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
Did you ever think about instead the option of just replacing yourself in the business and then taking a back seat? And then if not, why?
It was a very painful process, as I thought, towards selling my business, because just like the recurring theme goes, I fumbled into that. I had no intention of selling my business. I was fully committed to serving my clients forever, but I just got to that place where my courses were doing so well, and I was making way more with my courses, working way less than I was with my agency at the time, but keeping in mind that I was building an entire business on the side. So if I had not built joshhall.co, I absolutely could have scaled my business and just worked probably 15 hours a week, just doing some sales and running the team. But I had this big passion project, and this may come into play with someone's personality type, because I really did think like I could just hire everything else out and scale and bring in a project manager and bring in even a CEO and just be more of the leader. But I'm like, that's going to take so much work to do that, honestly, at that, where I was that business. And I had really struck a chord. I was building an audience. I had so much demand for my courses. At that time, this was March of 2020. I finished my suite of courses in March of 2020. And when the flood of COVID came online, that was when my courses really started to boom. And I kind of felt like, not that it's now or never, but I'm like, this is the real opportunity to like really do this and make now my course business a 6-figure thing. So I just went all in on that. And I was like, I could always get back into web design. Obviously, I was very smart about that. I didn't burn my clients. I made a really smooth transition. I did an entire month of work with creating SOPs that I hadn't done yet. I literally created videos off of every single one of my clients, how I met them, who they were, how much they're paying for Eric. And then I do have to say, it was not a sexy sell. I didn't sell my agency and then buy a yacht. Like, it was a fairly low 6-figure sale. I essentially just sold my maintenance plan, because that's all that was worth. I did have a client roster, which was worth something too, but the recurring income is basically what I sold. So, and what I did, we basically worked out a 10-year deal for me to get that amount back. And I'm kind of a consultant for the agency now. So Eric and I are still very close. Every quarter, I send them an invoice based off of my percentage of the profit is basically what we worked out. So as long as he keeps on growing it, I get paid more and more. Awesome. And it still keeps me in the door. I'm still on the website of In Transit Studios. I'm still the founder. So I still see behind the scenes. I see what's working. I'm almost more of a consultant and advisor to them. And I still stand by that decision. Like, I still feel good about doing that, because I don't think I could have launched all my courses. I couldn't have launched my podcast. I couldn't do my community, and I couldn't do everything I do if I was still heavily in the weeds of the agency. But I'm also I prioritize family time and not working more than 30 to 35 hours a week on average at most. That's the priority that kind of everything else revolves around. And I was like, I can't do both. I just cannot do 2 businesses at the same time. I just can't do it. I'm not the guy who could, it's just not my style. Like, I'm all in on one thing. So that's what ultimately led to me deciding to sell it.
Do you think that Eric in particular, like just his personality and who he was a deciding factor in how you chose to approach that?
Yeah, the reason I trusted him is because, number one, he used to be a pastor, and I feel like nothing is harder and more difficult in every aspect than being in like a ministry and dealing with people, with volunteers. Churches are you have to run it like a business for it to be successful. So I was like, if he could do that, I'm pretty sure he could do a web design business. I saw him take his web design business to 6 figures in a year. And most importantly, he was like over communicative, which, heads up, everybody, if you want to be a digital agency or a web designer, just communicate really well. And then you could be full-time. Like, most people just don't communicate well. So those things really made me feel like he's the one who could do this. He's also the one who was able to adopt the 2 children with his maintenance plan. So like, I felt like it really timed out amazingly, because he was actually wanting to get out of, he was still part-time ministry at that time, and he had built his web design business. And when I talked to him about this, I had a couple other people in mind, but he was the first. And he was like, dude, this is crazy, because like, I literally just talked about going full time with the business. So they would leave me room to be able to do this. And I was like, all right, let's do it. Let's do it. Based on those things, the wherewithal to be an entrepreneur, the professionalism he showed, and the communication. Yeah, that's what led to him being the right fit.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah, the problem is now he's such an entrepreneur, I have to reel him in. I'm like, Eric, don't start a new business. Keep this one going. That's the only problem with entrepreneurs. You have to reel them in if they're going to take over the business.
I had one final question. I think it ties it into like the actual purpose of the episode. And that's, what advice would you give to people who are just starting to design like their first few client websites in a way that makes that, I guess the advice would be, what advice would you give to somebody creating their first template website that they're going to scale? Because there's a stark difference between a website that you build custom for one client versus another client. So what are some of the elements or things that you consider when creating a template that you know you're going to swap out elements for other clients, and then like the fastest way and the most efficient, lean ways to do that?
I would base it off of something that actually works. So I would probably experiment with a few different designs for different clients and see what actually helps them grow their business. Because if you do that, you will have proven design chops, like a proven layout. And then you can create a template. And most importantly, you can confidently sell it, and you can confidently tell clients, like, this is what works. This is what's actually proven. And I have it because I have the numbers of clients who have worked. So I know it's really easy to probably get into design and typography and layout and hype, like theory and ideas. But if you just get a website designed to work for a client, there's your template, and just go off of that. I have a colleague, Jason, with he has a site called Swift Sites. He builds websites for coaches exclusively, and he uses Elementor. The sites are not like super fancy by any means. They look quote unquote templatized, but anytime he gets pushback on changing the layout and changing design elements, he's like, no, he refuses, because he's like, this is what works. It is what works for hundreds of his clients. So we will not deviate from what works. So yeah, that's the way I would approach it, is don't get your personal design preferences in the way. Don't tinker around with theory. Get it to work for one client, and then that's your foundation. That's your framework.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's kind of how we started. We built a ton of different versions actually from like the Divi templates that are in the template library, and then just kind of tweaked things. And then we just took the best of the best that converted for our niche, and we kind of made something together. And we really utilized the global elements, so we didn't have to change every single page. We just changed one element, and it goes across everything. And then it's actually recently that I had some serious pushback on a client who literally wanted to change everything. And I just wanted to be like, are you a web designer? Or do you do SEO? And I'm like, we can't, like, he wanted to have like a map of his service area underneath the header banner on the homepage.
Oh.
And we're like, first of all, that's above the fold. I'm not going to put that there. Second, do you think people come to your site to see where you service first or what you do? And then I said that, like, there's the way that what works in our industry is your header, and immediately under that, the services you offer. like we're not deviating from that unless you don't want it to work. So I sent him some examples of websites that and conversion rates. And in the spring, our template websites get a 25% conversion rate. And it's just astronomical. And when it's not in the spring, we're hovering right around 10% or like 7 to 10%. So I told him, like, I was like, here's a site we didn't build that we took on. It was WordPress Elementor. And then here's a site that we that we built based off this template that you're trying to modify. And I was like, this site in the spring got a 10% conversion rate. This one got a 25%. The same year, same time period, in a relatively same market. And then in the summer, which is like the low season for landscaping and lawn care,
Really?
One site got 10%. Yeah. So like the summer is like everyone's schedules are full. Like they're really not selling as much. They're more of kind of maintaining and doing projects. Whereas like the spring is like the rush. So spring or summer was a huge dip and less conversions, but there's 10% conversion rates on our sites. And then there's like a 4 to 5% conversion rate on other sites. So I'm like, if you don't want the higher conversion rate, we can make these changes for you. Ultimately, it's your site. You can do whatever, you can tell us to do whatever we want, but we're telling you that your conversion rate is going to be lower. Then I even did the same example for one of our templates that one of our clients was adamant about modifying, and the conversion rate was still lower than just sticking to the plan. Mm-hmm. And that was like the biggest factor for us. And now it not only like, is it good to be able to push back and say like, I'm just doing my job. Like my job is to tell you that that's not a good idea, but also it prevents our team from having to do any extra work. And allows them to just continue working on the things that they have scheduled.
Yeah, that term, I always go back to that term proven. Like I know when anyone's early, you're starting out, you don't have the luxury of being able to say that yet. But as soon as you do build a website that helps conversions or helps a client grow, then you do have a proven template, even if it's just one person. So always go back to that. Yes, because and actually, even I was just talking about Jason. He told me on my podcast one time, because I confronted him about this. I was like, what do you tell coaching clients who want to change their site design and have a custom site? And he said that his sales line is there's custom works of art and there's proven systems and proven designs. We do the proven designs. And once you have a business where it's proven, then you could experiment with a custom work of art. But if you need money and you need revenue, then we need to stick with what works. And then you could have the option to try something new out. You could always split test that for that particular client. You could say, let's go for a month with the map and let's go for a month with our process. And in 3 months, we'll look at all the data and we'll review it. And then that would be the ultimate test there. You don't want to make your clients feel bad.
That's a lot of work, though.
That's so good, though. I was like, write that down. This is so good.
That's the other problem, though, is like, well, do you want to go through the work to prove somebody wrong? Or you just want to say, listen, what we do works. If you want what works, we're a good fit. If you want to try your own thing, we're not a good fit. So we'll move on to somebody who's ready to grow the revenue.
A good example of a work of art, Apple's websites are working. Like, what do you think Apple's conversion rates are? I bet they're like astronomically low. I bet they're so low because they don't need it.
Yeah. That's the other thing too, is it's like, if it's a brand you're right. It's like they have a proven track record of their products and decades of, ridiculous users. And like they almost, I say they don't need a website because it's important. If I go look at a new computer, I'm going to go to the website and check out the specs and stuff. But they're not Apple. Like your little business, your little mom and pop business. I don't mean that to be degrading, but it's not an established brand like this. So you can't build your presence and your marketing like a big brand. It's just the idea of like a common theme here has been the bropreneur stuff. It's like, don't model your business after the bropreneur model. Like if you want to have a family and you want to have a balanced lifestyle, then don't follow the entrepreneur who has 6-pack and Lamborghinis and travels all year. Like you're not going to have the same business because you have a different output, you have a different outcome. So I think that same method is really important to articulate to clients when it comes to design. Like don't look at a company that is a different business model or has different design because they've established brand if it's not what you have. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that for sure.
Spitting fire, man. This is good. It's so good.
Spitting fire.
I love chatting with you guys. This is great. Yeah. We're definitely on the same page with all this. And I do. The cool thing about this, and I think what probably you guys are experiencing, and you're a really good example of, is you can kind of have a chill, small, tight-knit audience and do a lot with it. I mean, my community is only a couple hundred members right now. We're doing some things to expand it, but I don't want to be like a huge media web design empire. It's not my business model. The other thing is, like, as much as I've been tempted to do that, and this is, of course, translates to agency owners, it's like, well, okay, let's say you want to have a 25-person agency. Well, do you honestly, is that what you want? If you look at your calendar, like, do you want to have more meetings? Do you want more calls? You want to have more payroll? Want to have more overhead? Do you want to have more responsibility and weight on your shoulders? Like, honestly, what do you want? And man, I just, more so now than ever, that's what I teach my students. And that's what I'm trying to get out more to the world of entrepreneurs, is like, be very careful about who you're following. And I think, you guys know Jim Rome. He was like talking about the MLM stuff, like the multi-level marketing. He was kind of like one of the kings in that.
Yeah.
But I actually like a lot of his more motivational advice, because obviously something that's stuck with me 10 years later. But he said, be a follower, or be a student. Don't be a follower. And I think that's more important advice today than ever. Like, you can learn from different people and different perspectives, but don't just adopt everything everyone says. Like, Jake, you're following people probably out of just curiosity who you don't agree with or don't fit with. But for people who are new into the game, they probably don't have the wisdom to separate, like, what I take in and what I make practice out of. So I think, especially for new entrepreneurs and agency owners, like, just be really careful. I mean, I like a lot of what Alex Hormozy says, but if I were a new entrepreneur today, I would be very, very careful in saying, like, well, do I want to live that kind of life, or do I want to have a family and work 20 hours a week and have more freedom and hustle in seasons? Like, I think that's all that to say. That's my big passion right now, that message to get out. It's what I'm excited about, what you guys are up to, having a very honest podcast and honest show about, just this sweet spot between, like, solopreneur professional, but not stressed out, burnout agency owner who's on so many antidepressants they don't even know what they're doing. Like, so
Cody.
That's the biggie.
I think that the number one thing that I respond with, people say, I want to start an agency. Where do I start? And I see this all the time on Reddit and on Facebook. I just reply back and I say, why? Like, why? Why do you want to start an agency? And like 9 times out of 10, it's because it started from a YouTube video. I'm like, so you don't want to start an agency. You want to make money. Like, I can already guess where this is going. And if that's the case, fine, good luck. But if you want like a lifestyle, like if you like marketing, I accept that answer. If you like being able to work remote and you want to see if an agency can get you there, I'll accept that answer too. But usually when it comes down to like, I saw this, I was able to make this much money. I'm like, if that got your gears turning, you're not going to like the amount of work that's going to come with that.
Yeah.
So,
and there is a time, like, I do enjoy working, and I have to be proactive with turning the work off, especially mentally. I know every entrepreneur struggles turning the mind off when we're not behind our desk, but like, I'm all about hustle and seasons and all about hard work. And in the early days, you don't really need to worry about freedom as much, because your sole focus is making money to just make it. So I understand that too, but I think the reason why this is so important, as I look back, I think about this, is because I had a lot of imposter syndrome with agency owners who were around the same level that I was when I was starting out. And I saw them blow up their agencies and get an office downtown. And I was like, gosh, that's really cool. And I felt like, should I do that? Like, I feel like this draw, like I should do that, but
that's me.
I liked working from home, and I like that. And now, first of all, a lot of them have flamed out by now. They've already sold their agencies, or they've just abandoned it. And like, one case who is a company called the Media Captain in Columbus, if anyone wants to search it. Jason, the owner of that company, a different Jason, I saw him blow up this big agency, and then I realized like he still loves what he does, but it's a different business model than I want. So you just have to be so careful about following people's advice and proven path, if it, quote unquote proven path, if it really doesn't line up with you. So you almost have to, you have to decide like, what do you want? What do you want your schedule to look like? What type of clients do you want? What type of hard work are you willing to do? Because any amount of success is going to take a lot of hard work. You are going to have to, what's the quote? Like, choose your hard. You do have to choose, like, what am I willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to work hard at? And as long as you can align most things with that in this season, you're going to be cut out for being a sustainable entrepreneur. And that's what I truly want for people, is to not make a lot of money in web design for a year and then to get burned out and leave. I want people to build something that they can build a life off of for a long time. And then we can decide what the heck to do, because web design is going to look different in 5-10 years. So then we can decide what we're going to take it from there. But if you build the muscles of a business owner, an entrepreneur, and a strong business model and a good client list and good communication, then everything else you can experiment with different business models after that.
I always said that I love being an entrepreneur because you get to pick your hours. You just get to pick which 16 hours of the day you work.
Yeah. Heads up. It's very hard to turn off, but it's awesome. Like I'd rather do that than work in a cubicle from 9 to 5 any day. So
yeah, likewise. Well, man, this has been fun. This is like probably one of your, if not the longest episode I think you've had, at least on your podcast. So
closing on 2 hours. Yeah, because I think I'm going to repurpose this if you guys are cool with that. So this has been great, though, man. A lot of important messages here that I know a lot of my audience are going to resonate with, and I hope you do too. I feel like you guys probably have a harder job with the agency folks because you probably get more bropreneurs. You got to like reel them back and help them out. But
we get a lot of the
they're kind of recovered.
Yeah,
there's
two styles. There's two like we're trying to get people away from that bropreneur lifestyle.
But at the same time, bropreneur podcast. There's your guys' big. So.
The same thing though is like the bropreneurs who are still actively bropreneurs attack the podcast. Okay. So like we deal with both, and it's kind of like every now we get a new review. We're like 51 on Spotify with 4.6, and then it's like 52, 4.5. I'm like, you son of a bitch.
But they probably won't last. Podcasts barely last.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, Cody, do you got anything else? Are you good?
No, this is fun. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Man, Josh, give yourself, if you got any final words to say about any of the topics that we covered today, or go ahead and just plug yourself. Where can people find you? What are some of the resources you have?
Yeah, my website is joshhall.co. That's the best place to go as I start rhyming. Yeah, that's got the podcast. Web Designer Pro is linked in there. You can connect with me on. I'm only active on Facebook and Instagram currently, but just go to joshhall.co. Put you in the right direction there. Yeah, I mean, my big message is just kind of what I said, like really be honest about what you want, and knowing that might change season to season. But if you can build a business around your lifestyle rather than building your lifestyle around a business, that's what's going to keep you sustainable. So have that in mind. Reminder, put that as a Post-it on your wall or something, because it's very easy to deviate from that and forget that. So that's my big takeaway from all this. Well, I hope you enjoyed that one, friends. Again, super fun convo. Thanks to the guys, both Jake and Jody, for letting me repurpose this Jake and Cody, not Jody, for repurposing this for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this chat. I would love to hear any takeaways that you have. I'll make sure that both Jake and Cody know to check out the show notes for this episode, which will be found at joshhall.co/339. So go over there. We did cover some links and some other resources that will be over there as well. That's at joshhall.co/339. Cheers, my friends. I hope one or numerous things we talked about help you in your journey, whether you are an early stage web designer or whether you are a later stage web designer. And just to clarify something I said in this part of this conversation, I do like helping early web designers as well. What I meant by that is just that I did not want to go randomly to people and try to pull them away from a 9-to-5 job to get into web design. No, I want to help people who are already committed to web design but early in the journey. Just wanted to clarify that if you're still with me. I probably should have put that in the intro, but all good stuff. All right, friends, see you later. Have a good one, and be sure to subscribe to catch the next episodes. Doozies up ahead. Forewarning. So I'll see you there. Cheers, friends.